My guest today is Jim Kaitz, the President and CEO of the Association for Financial Professionals. In this episode, we talk about culture and talent development and how important they are. Yet pragmatically, we explore how-tos, how to foster the desired culture day to day, and how to continuously develop talent. I'm glad you're here to benefit from my discussion with Jim.
Welcome to the Courage of a Leader podcast. This is where you hear real-life stories of top leaders achieving extraordinary results. And you get practical advice and techniques you can immediately apply for your own success. This is where you will get inspired and take bold, courageous action. I am so glad you can join us. I'm your host, Amy Riley. Now, are you ready to step into the full power of your leadership and achieve the results you care about most? Let's ignite the courage of a leader.
When I first got the job here at AFP, it was kind of getting to a point where what was my leadership style? So what did I believe? And I read a lot of books from a lot of different leaders. And I think I came to the conclusion that you have to kind of develop your own philosophy, although you can borrow it and steal from others. But the one thing that in this book that struck me was when he talked about walking into organizations that didn't have a culture, that didn't have a well-defined culture. And then how do you set the expectations of an organization? Now, a lot of organizations have their core values, sitting on the wall, but that's exactly what they do. They sit on the wall. And after I read this book, realized that for me, it was not about them sitting on the wall, but actually making sure that the organizations that I worked for lived those core values. Mm-hmm. And so I'll stop there. And certainly can answer any questions in terms of how we do that. But that emphasis on core values has not changed in 23 years. And our core values have really not changed. I think from the original work that was done, we've updated them, made them a little more relevant, maybe hipper.
Okay.
But they remain the same. And we take them, we measure, actually, it's 50% of everyone's compensation at AFP. It's not only how you achieve goals, but also how you do that. And it's important that it's just not all about getting results. It's how you get those results. It's very important.
Yeah. And how do you embed the values
Correct.
into the culture? Really use them as guiding principles and behaviors you reward and uphold.
Well, it's reward and uphold, but also to have a conversation around. And that's what struck me. If you don't know what you stand for and they're either sitting on the wall or they don't exist. So how do you, as a manager or a leader in an organization, have a conversation with people? What is it based on? Well, it's based on what I think today or what I read in the paper. Here at AFP, it's based upon a very well-defined, clear set of culture expectations.
Nice. Does it show up in our conversations? Does it show up in our calendars? What we're doing day to day, is that in direct support of and alignment with the values? Right.
Melissa's here today, and she's a member of the senior leadership team. We meet every Monday and Wednesday, every morning. We used to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but we're probably sick of each other. But I don't know if at any meeting, every meeting, every week, something related to culture comes up with the leadership team in terms of just ensuring and how we even interact as a leadership team. Our culture is embedded in that in terms of what our expectations for each other are. So I think having it very well defined. So it and at least in our organization, I like to think we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. But I always say that these core values are aspirational, right? At every day and every moment, you'd like to think people are living those core values, certainly in the office environment or in the work environment. But I think you have to be realistic and believe that they're aspirational, but it's something to have a real concrete conversation around.
We are human beings, right?
Right.
We're going to have good days and not so good days and pressures and ambiguity happening, right? We're not always going to be at our best, 100% aligned with those values, recognizing that. But I love to hear that the senior leadership team is talking about it regularly. I don't think that's happening in nearly enough organizations.
Well, I think we hold ourselves accountable to that, and it's a way to really start the conversation. And if you've got something that you know you're having a benchmark against, then you can have a conversation. You might agree to disagree, but you're at least having a conversation around some specific actions and behaviors that we really feel are important at AFP for people to live by, at least live by during the office hours or the day.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty comfortable that most of the people at AFP live those values.
They take those home with them too.
Yeah, it's hard to change your stripes that quickly from after 5 or 6 o'clock. Well, one of the things that I've been emphasizing a lot, I think you mentioned you've seen a lot of the things that I've either been referencing or writing is related to people in the Treasury and corporate finance profession. And I don't think it's unique to corporate finance and Treasury. But on the other hand, if you think about the power of the CFO and organizations, there's a lot of articles right now about the CFO and capability building within their organizations, capability being one of the capabilities is talent development. Mm-hmm. And I think this is an area where CFOs, because they have such influence over the purse strings, I quite frankly don't believe that CFOs have really focused on talent development. I think that there is always been a little bit of a tension between the CFO and the CHRO. I actually sat on the SHRM board, Society of Human Resource Management, for 8 years.
Love that.
I will say that they all had kind of CFO envy. They wanted the CHRO to have kind of the stature of the CFO. And I think the CFO has that stature because she or he has, they control the purse strings in an organization. Nevertheless, there's a book called Talent Wins by Ram Charan and Dennis Carey from Korn Ferry. I did a podcast myself with Dennis. Mm-hmm. And it's really focused on, getting the CEO, the CFO, and the CHRO kind of on the same page in terms of talent development and skills development. You think about how much you read about how important upskilling is and talent development, and also, CEOs are talking about it constantly. Mm-hmm. Show me what you're really doing now. Mm-hmm. I really don't see it. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the challenges. It's one of the things I really want to challenge people. If you're going to say you're focused on talent, if you're going to say you're focused on upskilling, then what are you doing in a sustained way to make that happen in your organization? Yeah. So that's been one of the things that I talk about a lot. And I think if the CFO has got to get on board, because at the end of the day, that individual is going to be influential because the resources that have to be dedicated to talent development, and it's not going to impact the quarterly earnings. It's something that they have to take a long-term horizon when they think about it.
Mm-hmm. So in your view, Jim, what is part of the how? How do leaders and financial leaders focus on talent development, and how might AFP support them? Right.
I think the hardest thing when you're a finance person is, there's return on invested capital. That's how they look at resources. There are ways that from a financial standpoint, you can measure how value is being created in an organization, and also looking at cost. And unfortunately, when it comes to cost, the first thing that typically gets cut when there's difficult times is professional development budgets. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if you're talking about capability building and talent development being so important, and upskilling so important, and upskilling, getting employees to be, retain, because we are somewhat in the midst of the Great Resignation and people deciding, I really don't want to work for these organizations. And when you ask them what they want, a lot of those things revolve around commitment for learning new skills from the organization. And I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that organizations have. It's just not about, salary is always important. But I think this whole concept of upskilling, talent mm-hmm. development, that's going to take resources. One of the things you can look at is what is return on invested talent. Now, that's not an easy thing to measure at times. And again, if you're a publicly traded company, you're the Wall Street gets you focused on quarterly earnings. It's kind of hard to bake that in. Mm-hmm. But I think it's, having a commitment to people, having commitment to upskilling and talent development, I think is something that will distinguish organizations going forward.
Love it. And we are hearing from Jim Kaitz, who is the president and CEO of AFP, the Association for Financial Professionals, an association that represents over 16,000 Treasury and financial professionals globally. The organization, very importantly, has established and continues to administer the Certified Treasury Professional and Certified Corporate Financial Planning and Analysis Professional credentials, setting standards of excellence in finance. The AFP Annual Conference is the largest networking event for corporate financial professionals. Jim was formerly EVP and COO of Financial Executives Institute, a professional association of over 14,000 senior financial executives. His background also includes positions in government relations, trade and business affairs, and he was legislative assistant to the Honorable James Shannon, a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. So you bring a breadth of experience to your profession, Jim. I love the focus I see and hear on talent development and having financial professionals be those strategic partners inside of the organization. So I'm really glad to have you as a guest today.
Well, thank you.
So we're in the dynamic, rapidly changing times, filled with ambiguity and unknowns. What do you think how do we develop our financial professionals for the future?
Sure.
For the present and on into the future.
Yeah. So this won't be anything new to anyone that's listened to me. Certainty is an illusion, and it's always been an illusion. So when people say, oh, we live in ambiguous times, not to challenge you on this, but we've always lived in ambiguous times. All right. Again, certainty is an illusion. None of us have any certainty beyond, you get up in the morning and the eyes open. So I think it's, first of all, getting grounded in that we always have lived in ambiguity. I mean, I think we live in more challenging times a little bit, but I don't think any of us should be surprised. And I try to do a lot of reading in this as well. And if you look back historically, if you look at, the great philosophers, I mean, you can, this uncertainty, ambiguity, all is something that every culture has dealt with it at any specific time. So I think we tend to focus on those things. So for me, that grounds me. And that's the first thing. Like, okay, if I believe certainty is an illusion, then okay, so what are the things that I focus on? And then I go back to some of the things that we talked about earlier in terms of that's how we communicate with the people we work with. Let's just acknowledge this. This is the world we live in. So how do we take practical steps to overcome these things and deal with them? And I think that it's framing the issue for people to keep them grounded. Now, it would be naive of me to think that people aren't overly stressed out these days, and I think that's something you have to take into account as a leader. But I don't know if I've ever sat around, at least for the last 23 years, and said, everyone's skipping down the hallway and happy as can possibly be. I mean, you're always dealing with business problems. You're always dealing with obstacles. Celebrate those victories. But I think it's just, it's just instilling in people that this is the world we live in. You have to kind of accept it. And you kind of go from there. And again, being grounded in the core values for us at AFP. And that's our guiding principle in terms of how we look at the world and how we look at AFP. And I don't think it's any, that's how, I can't say that's the right thing for everyone. But I think it is the leaders and any leader's responsibility to set the tone in the organization, set the expectation, and also be realistic about what's going on in the world and acknowledge that and not try to say, well, everything's going to be okay. Well, everything might not be okay.
Yeah.
But stay grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And keep saying certainty is an illusion. So you have to deal with ambiguity.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I think it does bring us back to culture and the values. If we have a healthy culture where we can transparently talk about what's going on and debate healthily about what might be the best path forward. If we've got that supportive, values-based culture,
Right.
then that's a grounded, powerful place to start to figure out how we're going to deal with the uncertainty that's inevitably there.
I think it frames the discussion. It frames everything you do as an organization. I mean, I will tell you, AFP is half of our revenue comes from the event business. First reaction is, "Oh my God, I feel sorry for ourselves. We got dealt a bad hand." But you know what? It's reality.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, now let's fall back on those core values and figure it out. We did. And ran a really successful event last year, a very successful hybrid event. We actually had people in person at the event. And we will just continue to adapt. But I think that's got to be part of any organization's DNA and part of the culture and embedded in that culture. And I think that hiring, the other thing that I would say is the head of HR for me has always been absolutely one of my closest strategic advisors. Have to have the right people. You have to have recruit for the right people in an organization. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. And setting expectations for people that come into the organization, what it's going to be like, and around those set of core values. And I think that has put AFP, I think, in a good position as we go forward.
Nice. I like that. Here's the values that we aspire to. And listen, it's going to take some hard work sometimes, yes. Right? To continue to do our best to live into those.
Well, and during stressful times, how do we treat one another? How do we behave one another? What are the expectations? If you're stressed out, if something is going on, you don't have to necessarily tell everybody, but come on, you work with enough people enough times. I could look at you right away after knowing, and most of the people have been around at AFP for years. If they walk in or I see them on Zoom, and I'd be able to know in 10 seconds. And most people, something's going on. And the other thing we talk about at AFP, we talk a lot about a blended life. I really don't believe people can separate their work life from their home life. Mm-hmm. And can they really balance that home versus work? To me, I have yet to see someone that can really turn that off if your child is sick, or you have a parent that's not doing well, or if you're not feeling very well. Just to understand and appreciate the fact that we have a blended life, and work is part of that life, and not try to separate the two out. And we have discussions around that. And if somebody tells me I can do it, I can turn off, God bless you, but I'll bet you, but I good luck. I
wish I knew where that switch was sometimes, Jim.
Well, exactly right. And I will say, especially in these times when we're balancing so many different things and parents, and I happen to have a son who's a single parent, and, those are the types of things where, you can't separate, what's going on with your child, or what's going on with a spouse, or what's going on with a family member. So we talk about it and appreciate it and realize that we all have these blended lives, and it's a way to just have a discussion.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, I'll stop.
Yeah, I really like that term, blended life. I've often talked about work-life integration, right? Because balance is an illusion, just right. Like certainty is an illusion, right? How does it integrate? How does it blend together? And right. How do we, as leaders inside of organizations, support the whole person? And just even, from a standpoint of talent development, when we think about ourselves as leaders in all areas of our lives, there can be some transference of skills or even perspectives. It's like, why can I have a positive perspective in that area of my life? Like, maybe around my finances, right? But I don't have a positive perspective around being able to take care of my well-being, right? And what do I bring to work? And I think we can look at what's working, what's not working, as well as we'd like in different areas of our lives, and see how can we learn from one area to the next and blend.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a recognition that we all have this blended life. And to be honest, that, if something's going on at home or something's not going well for whatever reason that's outside your work life, chances are it's being reflected in your work life or a couple of days. And I just think it's that, again, we talk about it and have that recognition that it's there. By the way, it's not an excuse for not necessarily getting your job done, but it is
right.
But it is something to have a discussion around, and to be, to realize people have lives. People have lives outside of work, and very hard to separate the two, especially if you're now working virtually. So,
bringing awareness. Right. Yeah. Bringing awareness, because if we don't bring awareness, then our concern about our sick parent or whatever it is unknowingly running the show.
So my second favorite thing that we put on a pillow is self-awareness is a powerful tool. We talk about it all the time.
Nice.
And again, it's part of kind of the core values and who we are. But again, you've got to be self-aware. And we use it's one of the tools that we use for recruiting, but we do use the DISC profile, the multiple DISC profile. So that we can look at an individual, but it's as valuable to the individual as it is to the organization. Because in fact, anytime during like conference time when we go into high stress, the first thing I'll say is read that profile of what you like under high stress, because I will guarantee you it will be exhibited. And if you don't believe me, ask your spouse, your friend, your significant other, well, what am I like under stress? And guaranteed they'll describe exactly what is described in that profile. And again, it's one thing we use when we're looking at people. We don't say everyone has to have the same profile at AFP, but again, self-awareness is a powerful tool. And if culture is important, that means how do we interact with others? And it's important, I think, to understand getting some insight into who you are as a person helps you be better at working with others.
Absolutely. I'm DISC certified, and I've seen the power in understanding your strengths when those get overused in times of pressure, and giving teams objective language to talk about differences. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I've had to modify my behavior over my career, that's for sure. Because if you saw my DISC profile, you wouldn't think, I could lead a team of one. So it's been a lot of a self-awareness for this person right here.
I know that I've also seen you write and talk about strengths-based leadership. Why the focus on strengths?
I think, whether weaknesses or opportunities or challenges, I think it is, you want to focus on, where people have their strengths. Now, it's identifying where they have those strengths. And again, it goes back to what we just talked about. Self-awareness is a powerful tool. And I think people have to focus on what are my strengths and how do I leverage those? But it's just as important to understand, what are the areas that I need to work on as well. Most of the time it comes into those interpersonal skills, because when I was reading all those thousands of books when I first started this leadership journey was Jack Welch, and he had a very simple 4-part a grid, and it just had on one side, skills, and on the other it was the behaviors piece. And you wanted people who had the highest skill level, but also were living those core values in an organization. You want to be in that kind of upper right-hand quadrant. If you think about the quadrant, and it's kind of one of the things. Now, I wasn't a proponent of everything Jack Welch did, because I know he had, the lower 10% got cut. But when you think about that, just a very simple, 4 squares, that's something, again, to have a focus around. You want the people who are really high performers, but if they're destroying the culture of the organization, that's a very quick conversation here at AFP, because I can work with someone. I would, if I had the choice, I actually would want someone high on culture and maybe was struggling a little bit, because you can work on the technical skills. Sometimes it's very hard to work on those behaviors and attitudes. And I think that's the most important thing. And And if you tolerate someone who's a high performer yet is a cancer into the culture, that it defeats the whole. I think it does create a cancer within an organization that can spread, because it's, well, they're tolerating Sally or Joe's performance. So that, it runs contrary to those core values you have sitting up on the wall, and leaders will be second guessed in a heartbeat when that happens. And, having those tough conversations, especially with high performers, is a difficult one to have, but one we're pretty committed to. Obviously, we want everyone to be, highest on the skill level and highest on the culture piece. But as we talked about earlier, you have to be a little aspirational here as you think about it. So I think generally, if most people want positive reinforcement, let's build on your strengths. But I think it's also an opportunity to talk about things that you have to work on as well.
Well, and you're bringing it back around, Jim, to culture fit.
That's all you'll hear me talk about most of the time.
I love it. You've said a number of really valuable things to me today. The importance of the culture and living our core values, making sure that shows up in the day-to-day, how we make decisions, how we spend our time, what's on the calendar, what's in our language. How powerful it can be if human resources and finance have a strong strategic relationship.
Along with the CEO. I think it's that group of three, because it's got to start with the CEO. He or she has got to live those core values. I'll just tell you real quickly, when we first developed ours, typically you want to do things, kind of ground up.
Yeah.
But I felt fairly strongly that the core values had to be developed by the senior team, because the senior team has to buy into those. If you've got senior team buy-in, then that is a way to make them real to the rest of the organization. But there is nothing worse if you've got a set of cultures and a senior team that doesn't live those core values. Then you've got a lot of issues in the organization. So if people are thinking about doing this, I would spend the time with your senior leadership team, develop those set of core values and culture, put real meaning around them. If you saw our first description of the core values, it wasn't some pretty piece of language. It was, this is very clear expectations, so that if somebody looked at them, we could have a conversation around them. And then once they get, I think, embedded in the organization, it becomes a little bit easier. But make sure your senior team really buys into them.
Yeah, and talks about how does that look behaviorally? If someone's upholding that value, it means that they're doing this and that and the other. Nice. And
I've had plenty of conversations with our senior team about living their core values. That's for sure. And they would. Good. We don't advertise it, but we've had those conversations.
Yeah, we have to continue to talk about it.
Right.
And hey, that didn't look fully aligned with our value of
that would be a lot nicer. You would have said it a lot nicer than I would have said it. But those are my Boston roots. I think we would have. We get right to the point. But, we
gotta be having those conversations, right? It's important. Are we walking the talk?
Yeah, and it goes back to another word that's probably way overused, but it builds the trust too. That you're having a conversation around trust. It's not about I'm about to fire you, or hey, we got an issue here, and it's really at every level building that trust the best you can.
Yeah. Well, in other words, right? Safety and alignment, right? Yeah.
But to me, well, you probably know it all starts with those core values.
Well, and that is what helps us deal with the uncertainty that is guaranteed to be there. So that's another takeaway. Uncertainty is a given.
It's an illusion too.
Yeah. Certainty is an illusion.
It's an illusion. Yeah. That's very stoical, but I'm sure you know that. That's kind of a very stoic way of looking at the world. But I've embraced it.
Yes. And we have blended lives.
Yes.
I like that terminology. Jim, it has been a pleasure, and you have left us with some great food for thought. Thank you for your time and
thank you, Amy,
being a guest on the episode.
That was a pleasure. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Terrific.
Take care.